everyone, and welcome to Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails, the weekly podcast that helps you grow your business, improve your life, and enjoy yourself along the way. I'm your host, Alan Langer, and every week we try to bring you the best thought leaders, the best business leaders, and the best minds out there to help you succeed in business and in life. So sit back, relax, grab your pad, your pen, and your favorite beverage, and enjoy the next episode of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. This is your host, Alan Langer. We are on episode 41 tonight. We are flying along into the new year, and you better sit back and get a pen and a paper because I've got a great guest coming up tonight in Terry Jones. And yes, that's the Terry Jones of the Kayak fame, of the Travelocity fame. We're going to talk about that. Terry is joining me tonight. I am really, really excited that he's giving us some time out of his busy schedule. So Terry, I'll get to you in 1 second, but thank you for being here. But real quick, the podcast website is marketingandsalespodcast.com. Go visit that, check it, do some likes, do some reviews, but most importantly, send me a question to the Ask Alan segment from the website. If we do read your question live on the air, you get a free signed autographed copy of my book. All right, I'm very excited. So without any further delay, Terry Jones, welcome to the Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails podcast. How are you tonight?
Alan, it's great to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. You're in Nevada, as you told me pre-call, and I'm in Rhode Island, so it's a little early for a cocktail over there. But for me, this is 8th Zoom call of the day, so I'm partaking in a little tequila, a little sip.
I'm usually at that level. I only think I've had three. three Zooms, not 3 cocktails.
Yeah. Well, cheers to you. Thanks for joining us. So,
cheers.
Like I mentioned prior to when I introduced you. You've had so much success in the startups that you've had. Now you're a venture capitalist, and you started Kayak and then Travelocity, or it was in that order, correct? Or was
the
it
other way around?
Other way around. So Travelocity first, and Kayak. Tell us how that happens. We got a lot of solopreneurs, a lot of business owners who are really interested in how people like you became successful and how all of that started. So
sure.
Why don't you tell us a little about that?
I thought I didn't know what I was going to do when I got out of college. I thought I was going to Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
I had a low draft number. Luckily, they rejected me for my eyes. And I ended up, because my roommate, dad, was a pilot for TWA, he had a free pass. And he said, before I go to grad school, I'm going to go around the world. And I said, well, I've saved up some money. I don't have a job. I was a history major. So 3 of us went around the world. And I talked to one of the guys today, actually, 50 years ago. I came back and I wanted to get in the travel business. So I went to school at night, got a job in a travel agency. 6 months in, my manager said, let's go do a startup. So 21, that was my first startup. We started a travel agency doing business in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. I had to go to Russia in 1970 and negotiate our deal.
Wow.
To get appointed, because you had to be appointed by the Russian government. There were only 4 U.S. travel agents who could send you to Russia. We became the 5th. And in 5 years, we turned that into the 50th largest travel agency in the U.S.
Just going
while
to
I was
Russia?
doing that. Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Russia and Eastern Europe. That was our focus. Eventually, we became just general business travel, but we still had a core focus there that kind of propelled us forward into these big companies like International Harvester and others. Mm-hmm. We computerized the agency, and I got interested in computing. And I finally decided I wanted to change. So I jumped to work for the computer company that had sold us the computer that printed our tickets and did the back office work. And went to work there, moved from Chicago down to Florida. That company we sold to American Airlines after 6 months. So suddenly I was in a big company. And I spent 18 years inside American Airlines in marketing and in IT, worked my way up to chief information officer. So I was one of the top executives. A couple of thousand people, $400 million budget, big IT shop, lost my hair running that. And but we had a little online product that we'd had for about 8 years on AOL and CompuServe called Easy Sabre. And the travel agents woke up and they said, you guys should get rid of that, because we had a huge travel agent network at American that we'd computerized. Mm-hmm. And the CEO said, no, give it to Jones. He's over in IT, used to be a travel agent. Let him run it. We'll kind of hide it over there. And the first thing I did when I got it was put it on the internet. That became Travelocity.
That was new at that time, right? The internet.
1996, first year you could be on the internet.
Yeah, wow.
So that Travelocity is a story of entrepreneurship. We actually grew it inside American Airlines and spun it out and took it public. And that's one of the reasons my book on innovation sells well, because it's the story of internal, inside big company innovation, which is a very hard thing to pull off.
Yeah.
Particularly as something that size. Later, they bought that company back and took it private, and I left because I was convinced they were going to screw it up if they took it back, which they did.
Yeah.
And I became a public speaker. My brother's a National Geographic photographer and public speaker. He got me into public speaking, and an author, and I started doing board work. I've now served on 19 corporate boards, both startups and large public companies.
Wow.
And I got into venture capital, and that led to the creation of kayak.com. We were working in the travel space. We saw this opportunity for search and travel, and the VC firm invested, and I became the chairman of Kayak, where I served for 8 years. We took the company public, later sold it to Priceline for $1.8 billion. So that was another great outcome, And I thought I was pretty well done with startups, except for being on boards. And then I got a call from Ginny Rometty, the chairman of IBM, who I knew from consulting and speaking. And she said, could you come up and teach IBM Watson about travel?
Wow.
Which was their AI. And I was, didn't know if there was any money in it, but I went, and that turned into a startup. IBM invested, and we had an AI startup for 4 years. Unfortunately, that one failed. We were too early. Travel is still dead last of all industries deploying AI.
No kidding.
Learned
really.
a lot. Yeah, so I had a $15 million education on what not to do. And so now I'm still a speaker. I do about, last year I did 45 virtual speeches. An author of 2 books, one on innovation, the other one, Disruption Off. We'll talk about disruption. And I'm still serving on 5 boards. So,
wow.
I've done 5 startups, 19 boards, probably seen every business situation there is in those 19 boards.
Tell me what you mean by travel is dead last in utilizing AI.
I wish I'd seen this graph before I went into to AI and travel, but McKinsey did a graph of penetration. So financial services way out at the front in terms of deploying AI. Autos, general manufacturing kind of in the middle. And travel is one of the very last industries to deploy it, which is crazy because travel is the biggest piece in e-commerce. It's bigger than the next 3 categories of e-commerce combined.
No
so
kidding.
one would think it would deploy AI well, and we had some great ideas, but sometimes you're just too early. I've had several things I've done in my career because I'm an idea guy that were just too darn early and the public wasn't ready, or the buyer.
So when you say AI and travel, do you mean like a virtual look at travel or?
No, well, for example, why can't you go to a website and say, I want to go to an island in February with my wife. It needs to have amazing golf, a great spa, and things for my kids to do. Mm-hmm. You can't ask that question. The only thing you can put into a travel site is what city would you like to go to and what dates?
Yeah.
Which means you got to do all that work up front to try to figure it out. And then you'll get there and it says, sorry, it's not available. Right. So we did that kind of thing using natural language. We would, if you search that way, what are you going to see? A picture of the golf course first.
Yeah.
And if you see that, more people will buy. Yeah. And instead of reading 1,000 reviews, you can read the 3 that said this has the best spa ever. Because if it says spa in the listing, that could mean a hot tub or a building.
Yeah.
You don't know, right? So we did all that, didn't sell. We finally moved into using AI in advertising to recommend the perfect ad for the right person at the right moment. That started to work, but by that time we'd run out of money. So that happens. That's one of the key reasons. I mean, the biggest reason that startups fail is no market fit.
Yeah.
You think it's a great idea and the market says, nah.
Yeah, you would think just saying what you're saying is like a brilliant idea. Like, how could that not be a good idea? And
people, and we proved that it worked. But we were selling to IT. It was a B2B product, not a B2C. I'd mostly done B2C. It was very hard to get these large hotels and airlines to change.
Yeah.
They're just very conservative. Now, this is an opportune time for people to roll out risky products because companies are taking big risks right now.
Are they really?
Particularly in travel, they're flat on their back.
Yeah.
This is a very lumpy recession. Marriott has the worst quarter ever. Walmart hires 100,000 people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So depending on what sector you're in, you're either dead or doing good.
Oh yeah. I mean, I came from I did a lot of B2C myself in the construction industry, in-home selling, particularly Andersen Windows. And Andersen Windows this past year, after literally not having any appointments the entire month of March, had their biggest month in their 100-year history.
Oh, they're killing it. Yeah, anything to do with construction, remodeling. When people are home, they want their homes to be great. I invested in building a video studio in my office because I had to go. My business totally died. Right?
Yeah.
Public speaker. Beginning of March, that was it. I've been on an airplane since.
Yeah, and, I was like you. I had not like you as far as stature, but I had eight speaking gigs scheduled for April and May, and they disappeared, and there went my client pipeline as well.
Exactly. So I switched, and it's very interesting. I don't think any meeting going forward will not be a hybrid meeting. Every meeting is going to be hybrid video and in person, and people are going to say, well, let's not bring the guys from Asia. Let's save the money.
Yep.
And what they're getting is higher attendance in open meetings, in public meetings. I bet you'll see more people at CES than ever right now. And they're seeing higher levels of engagement. It works. But I had to realize that my competition as a speaker was now television. Yes. So I have interviews during the middle of my speeches. I pre-tape, never did that before. I'm doing more polling. I'm showing more video. I'm mixing it up because, like CNN or Fox, I got to have a graphic, a crawl, an interview. I got to have all kinds of stuff going on. Otherwise, my customer's doing their email, right?
Yeah. So you're talking about if you're giving an actual speech online, you were hired to give a speech. You're adding all of these components to keep the audience engaged as if you would do it live.
Oh yeah, more than I would do when I was live. In live, I'd be a talking head with slides.
Yeah.
I immediately built a studio because I wanted to immediately show that my face is on top of the graphics, right? I'm not the little guy in the corner. I bought a switcher, and I'm able to change graphics. I'm not in my studio right now, but normally I can switch graphics immediately and change things and show, get into a poll or do all kinds of things because to the audience this is TV.
Yeah,
and it has to be as good as TV.
What a great point. So you're saying stuff here that actually I think my audience and even myself haven't really thought of it that way. Like we've been on Zoom now since March, like so most of it. Move around. I was on 3 Zoom calls in my life before March, and now I'm on 10 a day. But I've never that concept you just said, thinking about it as TV. I've never thought about it as TV. I've always thought about it as a presentation. That's a brilliant way to look at it.
If people go to tbjones.com, my website, you can see what I mean. I didn't move over into my studio for this call, but there, I can't, because I had this switcher, I'm on top of the slides. I can leave, I can come back, I can produce it all. And I've got a little production unit in my left hand that can do all the kinds of things they do in TV because I'm the little man in the box. I am TV. Right?
And you're doing all this yourself. You don't have a producer sitting next to you or anything like that?
No, I can't. It's COVID. I had my wife doing it for a while, but it's never good to have your wife be your technical assistant. Probably not good for your marriage. So we got on fine, but it's just easier for me to do it myself. And I did it, with some relatively inexpensive hardware. But it worked for me. And the best review I got was one where a guy said, it was like you were here with me. In my office.
That's
awesome. It was a conversation, and that's what you need to do because we've all been on the Zoom call with fuzzy slides and bad sound and
all of it. Like even for me, when
the guy said, "Well, here's my graphics." He's holding up. So I think every business needs to change. My book, Disruption Off, talks about 10 new technologies that are coming to disrupt business. That's the first half of the book, and the second half is what do you do about it? When I give the speech that way, the first half of the speech is to scare the crap out of you about what's coming, and the second half is, okay, now that I'm scared, what do I do? And you've got to look at your business today, particularly post-COVID, and say, am I deploying? What am I doing with the cloud? What am I doing with AI? Am I using IoT? Am I using 5G? Are my competitors doing that? Is my business model need to change? I mean, who thought we'd have subscriptions for razors or direct-to-consumer mattresses or, people selling outcomes? Like Philips, the lighting company, just went to Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam and said, we don't want to sell you light bulbs anymore. We want to light the airport for the next 20 years. We want a contract for light. Yes. And they won that contract.
Really?
So now they put in bulbs that use less power, bulbs that last longer because they're their bulbs and it's their electricity. And they even recycle them when they burn out. And instead of selling a piece of hardware, they have a very profitable outsourcing contract for light. And that's the way to rethink your business.
So these 10 things that are coming, let's talk about that. Are they applicable to every size business, or are these more?
Not necessarily. I mean, but look at the small businesses that jumped onto 3D printing during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
That were printing masks, that were printing shields. GE just introduced the first 3D printed jet engine part, got it approved by the FAA. Yeah. Think of how that was built before. 3 or 4 small guys put together their piece, sent it to an assembler. He put it together, stuck it in a warehouse, got the order, put it on a ship, put it on a truck, got it to GE. Yep. Now, GE has a printer, or a supplier right next to the plant has a printer. And GE gets a part that's cheaper, lighter, faster, stronger. And what happened to the customs broker, the trucker, the shipper, the assembler? They're all gone.
They're all gone.
So if you look at your product, you say, well, maybe I'd be better off to be the 3D printer, or I can make these parts quickly, using that technology. Or a friend of mine in Chevy Chase, Maryland, called up for grocery delivery, didn't want to go. He's 70 like I am. And he gets a call, your groceries are outside. He walks outside, there's a drone the size of a radio flyer wagon in front of his house. And he went and picked the groceries out. Now, that was prohibited before COVID, but the grocer just said, to heck with it. Nobody's going to stop me. Bought a bunch of these drones. Saved a lot of money from getting a bunch of drivers. Worked well for him, right?
And he hasn't killed anybody yet?
No, they're little wagons. They don't go real fast. But look, farmers are completely automating their cow barns, so the cows walk in and get milked with a combination of robotics and AI and go back out to the field. They're making more milk, because they can't hire people to get up at 5 a.m. to milk cows. Mm-hmm. All these technologies are being deployed. You don't have to build it yourself. You just have to say, what makes sense for me? Mm-hmm. I just made a speech to the I-80 truck stop. It's the biggest truck stop in the world in Iowa. Mm-hmm. We're talking about things like the IoT, the Internet of Things. Well, trucks are getting very smart, and they know now when parts need to be replaced. They have a huge truck repair shop. So I said, why don't you guys make sure that you're on the right frequency and work with the biggest freight lines, so that if they got a truck that's coming along and needs to be fixed, the truck can tell you it needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
And you can get it fixed and get that guy back out on the road, which is what they want.
Right. Rather than breaking down.
If your competitor does it and you don't do it, they're going to go over to that truck stop.
Wow. So let me ask you this question. I do a live stream every Thursday with a friend of mine. We call it the human factor, and it's based on sales and marketing, but it's sales and marketing for humans and not robots. Do you still see? I hear a lot of this different talk, one way or the other. Like, automation is taking over sales, is taking over marketing. How much of automation do you think is going to take over, and how much human interaction is still going to be needed? Do you think human interaction will ever go away? Or is it always going to be needed in a business standpoint?
I think, look, human interaction is always needed, but I think you have to think about what the biggest change is. I was riding in a van with a bunch of guys from the largest electronic distribution company in the United States, and we're going to the cocktail party before my speech. And I said, "What's your biggest change, guys?" And they said, "We can't call on purchasing anymore. The guy's working out of his house in his pajamas." This was pre-COVID, right?
Oh, really?
So, how do you relate to that person? How do you break in? Now, I'm on the boards of two very large companies where sales by Zoom has worked very well for us. Our sales are doing great.
Yep.
Does that mean it always will? No, you're going to have the relationship. But, we've decided we're not going to send both the salesman and the sales engineer out. The engineer can be on Zoom now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't really need to be there.
Yep.
On the other hand, the best salesman that I had when I was the CIO at American Airlines, even then, I really didn't need the salesperson to give me speeds and feeds. They were already available on the internet. I could get the data.
Yeah.
What I wanted to know was to have somebody who knew my business well enough to tell me how the product could change my business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when things didn't go well, could get the ear of the right person in their company so I could get the right part or the right thing when I needed it on time, right? I needed somebody as an expediter, somebody who could get inside, or somebody who could look at my business and say, "Look, I can save you this much money or increase your sales by this much if you'll do this, if you'll take a risk." So I think it's important for salespeople to look inside the company and kind of glom onto the person who wants to rocket up to the top and say, "I can help you get there because I'm going to fix your division by doing this."
Yes.
Because nobody needs you anymore to tell me that your product has so many more cycles than the next guy, or is this much cheaper to maintain. Tell me how it's going to fix my business.
Or your problems. That's
or my problem, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me, this is a great vantage point that you're on the show because, you've run companies, you've been CEOs, you started all these startups. The best salespeople, and I think you just said it, but the best salespeople that you've met in those positions have been the salespeopeople that have said, "These are the problems I can solve." I'm assuming would be a correct statement.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I teach that. I mean, I go out as, part of what I do, and lots of times I get hired to talk to salespeople. At Honeywell, I spent a bunch of time with the guys at Honeywell because they moved from selling sensors, which they've done for 100 years, again, to selling outcomes. So now, instead of the red light going on, the sensor started by saying, well, air conditioning's down in section 4. So that went from sensing to meaning. But then they went from meaning to action, which is air conditioning down in section 4. We've turned on the backup and services dispatched. That's an outcome, right? Wow. So they're selling that outcome. That's very different sale from competing on price to sell a sensor.
Sure.
But they realized if they didn't do that, Google would come in, design the system, and then they just get specced out to the low bid, right?
Yeah.
They'd be the flea on the tail of the dog. Yeah. So they had to really change how the sales force was approaching the business, change the contact the salesperson was talking to, because it's no longer the purchasing guy who's speccing the sensor. Now it is, the factory manager who wants to keep his factory running. Wow. Very different sales approach. And I think that's going to happen all over the place as we see these more sophisticated systems, because I'm not selling a tractor anymore. I'm selling an agrarian system, right, that runs the whole farm.
Right. Well, when I train, and this is kind of rudimentary, but it's amazing how many salespeople don't do this, is you don't sell the product, you sell the problem that you solve. And, when I used to train the Windows salesman, I would start my talk by saying, "Okay, what do you sell?" And they would say, "I sell windows." I'm like, "No, you don't." "What do you sell?" "I sell doors." "No, you don't. You sell a problem to their drafty living room. You sell a problem to their rotted entry door that's leaking water. You're not selling the product. You're selling the solution to the problem."
Right. You're selling the solution to their problem. That's what they want to fix. And people many times don't get that.
Yeah.
And solutions are becoming ever more important as we get into cloud-based smart products, where you actually are selling a subscription to that, right? That's what you really want to do, because you want recurring revenue.
Yes.
And so many businesses I've talked to so many, whether it's the Oracles of the world or the electronic salespeople, where now I'm not selling a server, I'm selling a subscription to a cloud.
To a cloud,
that's going to solve your problem. That's a very different kind of a sale.
Yes, it is. Wow. So in your experience, I like to ask some of my guests like some of their favorite stories that they have. So if I say, top of your head, funniest business story you can think of, what comes to mind?
Funniest business story. Usually people ask about problems.
I want some humor. Something that cracked you up, or like you couldn't believe happened, or something like that.
I'll tell you a crazy story. So right after 9/11, our business was off 70%. Nobody knew what the lines were going to be like at TSA, because TSA, just started to exist, and people started clamping down. So for Thanksgiving, I put people in 17 airports with stopwatches, timing the lines. They called in, and we had a moving graph on Travelocity that showed how long the line is: LaGuardia, O'Hare, LAX, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And I got a call from CNN, and they said, "Would you like to be on CNN every 2 hours for the next 3 days?" I said, "Well, let me think about that." Yeah. Yeah. So we had a little TV studio in our building, because I'd put that together so we could be on air really quickly. And they came down, and so I'm doing this stuff, on CNN. Well, how long's the line here, there? It got kind of boring, and they said, "Could you provide some color?" And I said, "Yeah." They said, well, "Hey, LA, what are you, or New York, what are you finding?" "Oh, people are bringing guns. People are bringing knives. People are bringing ice skates. People are bringing giant hockey trophies and hockey sticks." And they were confiscating all this stuff. Well, in LA, they were confiscating thumb screws and let's say personal stimulation devices. It got so I said, I can't talk about this stuff. So I got to be a little crazy, but unbelievable amount of publicity. From doing things like that. We did a lot of crazy things to get publicity. We put guys at Dallas Fort Worth Airport. And randomly, we'd stand there, and you have to pay for getting out of parking. We'd pay for people's parking and tell them about Travelocity.
Wow.
So we got in the evening news, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can do a lot of guerrilla marketing when your product is coming out that can look what Dollar Shave Club did. Or Harry's. That guy was on YouTube. Yep. It was brilliant.
Brilliant.
Right?
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
And it was all YouTube.
Yep. And you see some of these, now these 30-second commercials on Instagram now, and you see them all over the place, where they're actually really well-produced commercials in your feed, in your scroll.
Right, exactly. And, if you do it well, I mean, we didn't do advertising at Kayak for the first 7 years. It was all search.
Yes.
How did we win? We had great search, but we also had an amazing product. So if you have an amazing product, how'd you like the last Tesla ad you saw, Alan? You've never seen a Tesla ad.
Right.
No, they don't advertise.
Right. They don't advertise.
They don't have to advertise. They have an amazing product.
Right.
And you didn't see an Airbnb ad or an Uber ad for the first 10 years of both of those products.
100%.
Because they're amazing products. You don't have to.
Right.
If they're really great. And you can generate tremendous amounts of PR. And we did that with Travelocity. I mean, I knew we were successful at Travelocity, that when the clue in the New York Times was something like finding the lowest airfare, and the answer was Travelocity.
You were in the New York Times.
I knew we had won. We were in the New York Times crossword puzzle.
You made it.
Yeah.
Tell me your initial reaction. You just mentioned Airbnb. I used to have a couple of Airbnbs myself. Tell me your reaction as a guy who ran travel companies and been in business. When you first saw that concept, what did you think of it?
Well, it had been around before Airbnb, because VRBO in the vacation rental market had been there before.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. I thought
there was a guy who did the roll-up of about 15 of those companies to create VRBO, and made one computerized back end for it. And I thought that was a brilliant idea that he did that, because we were always looking, for what's the next disparate market in travel to roll up. Mm-hmm. And that was it. Hotels have been done, and hotels.com and booking.com made billions. Mm-hmm. And, it was alternate accommodation. So I thought it was a great idea. And then when Airbnb came along, that was different, because it was, just rent a room in your place. That's how they started.
That's how they started.
And it was the same brilliance of Uber, because when Uber started, it was black cars. And they said, you've already got the car. Just fill in when you're not getting rides. You're already working for somebody else, but you've got your own car. So fill in.
Wow. Oh, really? So that was the beginning of Uber. I didn't know it was
that was the beginning of Uber. It was just fill in, it was for drivers, bring your own car. And, Uber X and, the small cars, all that stuff came later, but it was started with black cars.
Wow.
And it was very successful. And you could get a black car cheap. And it was so much better. Here's a good small business story. So
okay.
I have a house down in San Clemente, California. It's 2 hours to LAX and during traffic. I used a local company, not Uber, when I moved down there about 7-8 years ago. And all his drivers were complaining that they didn't have any automation. And the owner asked me to review his website. And normally, I charge a bunch of money, but he was a small business guy. I thought I'll do it for him. And I wrote him a scathing review. His website was terrible. And he never wrote me back. So finally, I wrote to them one day. I said, why didn't you write me? So he hurt my feelings. I said, George, your website doesn't have price. And he said, well, I want people to call me. And we're a little more expensive, but we're better. I said, it's the 21st century. Nobody's going to call you. And I can't book. Why can't? Well, I want people to call me.
Oh, boy.
And I said, look, here's my recommendation. Use the same cars and the same drivers. Open another website. Call it San Clemente Online Limo. Put in price, the ability to book, and have an app so people know when you're coming. They don't have to look for that guy holding up his kid's homework with your name on the back of it in the middle of the LA airport. And, it might cost you, a new car, maybe $15,000. And run them side by side. See what the customer wants. The people who want to call you still can call you, but the new customers will see you as a forward-looking company that's easy to book. Because Uber is coming here and you're going to die. Mm-hmm. He said, I don't know. I said, how old are you? He said, 55. I said, that's too bad. He said, why? I said, because if you were 64, I think you might make it and sell your company. But at 55, you're not going to make it if you don't change. And 3 years later, dead. Company.
Oh, wow. So he never took your advice?
Never took my advice. Wow. And you got to change. Yeah. We all have to change. I mean, I did my first startup at 21, my last one at almost 70. And, I started out, I made my first reservation in a travel agency to Russia by telegram. That was 1970, but the Russians hadn't advanced. My last company was AI. How did I get from here to there? Not by staying the same.
Yeah, exactly.
That's for damn sure.
Well, what's his name? The financial guy. His name is escaping me. The famous financial guy's got 1 million books and everything. He did a great TED talk. Dave Ramsey. He did a great TED talk on stage. He had an icebox, an actual 1915 icebox, and talked about the history of the companies that, there was the icebox, but the change was coming because, when they refrigeration, everything. And one of the companies that he pointed out that was reluctant to change was Sears. And right. Look what Sears has done. Not that they didn't get refrigerators, but they were reluctant. But they were
Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were Amazon. I mean, look, they sold everything from toothpicks to houses.
The houses, yeah. Sears kits, yeah.
And I used to read that catalog, and they didn't make the jump. Mm-hmm. They jumped to retail, and they're a big retailer, but retailers have been tough, and they didn't get the online business. Look, a lot of people didn't. Yeah. American Express, the world's largest travel agency, outsourced their website to me. Travelocity ran their website.
No kidding.
What did I learn? I learned a lot, and they never really got online. It was like Target who outsourced to Amazon. I mean, come on. What flavor of poison do you want?
Exactly.
It just, you've got to look at the future and change. And right now, in the middle of a pandemic, is a time to sit back and, that's what I talk about in Disruption Off. Look at these new technologies, see how they're being deployed in other industries, and say, maybe I could do that. Maybe I'm not going to reopen my restaurant. I'm going to be a ghost kitchen because I can make a lot more money cooking 3 different kinds of cuisine in a warehouse and delivering it, and I don't have to have the building. Yeah. Or, maybe I can take, my product to the next level by adding 3D printing or IoT, or, I can have a connected product that's connected in the cloud. how can I change? My insurance man up here in Incline Village, Nevada, 6,000 people. He's a typical big insurance guy, community leader, Rotary, all that stuff. And about 5 or 6 years ago, he said to me, I have a terrible social media presence and I'm not on YouTube and I don't really get it. And then a couple of weeks later, he said, I figured it out. I said, what'd you do? He said, I hired my kids. They know all this stuff. And now he has a great presence on social media and he's doing videos and the kind of insurance he sells, it really works. Look, he said, I didn't know how to do it, but I knew I had to do it. And as long as you know you have to do it, you don't need to know how to do it. My son left, has been in gaming his whole career, and he left Electronic Arts, the world's largest game company, and started his own business. Now, at EA, they have 250, 300 people on a game. They're spending $150 million. How do 4 guys compete? You outsource everything except your core, right? They worked out of their apartments. Their IT was in the cloud. Their customers came from social. Somebody else did their music. You can do that today. That's why you can start a new company today on a credit card, because there's so many services that are available on a gig basis to surround your business. It's much easier to start a company than it ever was, and you could fail small and figure out and change as long as you're nimble and you listen.
And I think some of the points you're making are so brilliant. And also, it's, as I'm listening and thinking, I think one of the things that some of the entrepreneurs or the solopreneurs run into, or at least someone like me, I'm very determined, workaholic. It's like, sometimes it's hard to outsource. Sometimes like, I got to do everything myself because but then you start realizing no way, because there's so many people that can do it a lot better than I can.
Yeah. Just do the best thing yourself. What are you best at?
Right.
And that's what you have to do. Right. And look, the number one point I make, whether it's to corporations or solopreneurs, business is about risk. You've got to take risk. You've got to experiment, and you're going to fail. The best baseball player fails 70% of the time, right? So you get a lot of at-bats, but you should be always experimenting. You have to run the marathon and the sprint. The marathon is running out your product every day. The sprint is, what's the new thing I'm going to do? And you have to be able to juggle both. You can't just focus on the marathon, because the world's going to get swept out from underneath you, and you're going to be selling ice instead of refrigerators. You don't want to do that. So, now you can use web testing on your product. You can build a prototype with a 3D printer. You can outsource somebody to make it for you and test it with your customers and say, oh, it sucked. What did I learn?
Yes.
Why do sports teams watch game films? Not to assess blame, to ensure victory. What did we learn from that play? Didn't work. Well, yeah, but could we change it? Or throw it out of the repertoire? I mean, look, if you fail all the time, you're going to get sent to the minors, right? But otherwise, you're going to learn and improve yourself, and you're going to improve your batting average. So, place your bets and experiment and change, particularly in a world that's changing at this speed. It took 75 years for the telephone to reach 100 million users. Pokemon Go did it in 15 days. Why? Because the world is connected. We're all connected, and that's the speed of innovation today. It can come from anywhere. I went last year. I do a lot of work for the U.S. Department of State, lecturing to startups, and I do it for free. They pay for my airfare, and I go and do it. And they sent me to Outer Mongolia, right?
Really?
And yeah, I'm in Outer Mongolia. It's winter, and these guys, they're landlocked between Russia and China. They know anything they develop has to move out of there, so they're doing a lot of online stuff because the internet does move out of there. So they're looking at they've got some interesting fintech products, that are actually being adopted. They're pretty smart because they know the world is connected, and it really doesn't matter where your product comes from anymore.
That's so true.
If you can do it in Outer Mongolia, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah. Do they have delivery out of Outer Mongolia?
No, none.
None.
Unless you want yaks or ice.
Yeah. Speaking of your insurance guy, just reminded me. I started a TikTok account about 6 weeks ago. You know who runs that account for me? My 12-year-old.
There you go.
And she's doing a hell of a lot better than I would.
we had a clone of Travelocity online. This is, 1999 or something. And, the colors were the same. The name was almost the same. And we finally called up the number we got for this web hosting, and this lady answered, and she said, well, we said, you have to cease and desist this. She said, what does that mean? I don't have a computer. It was her 12-year-old son. So we had to get him to desist. We gave him some free software and said, copy somebody else. Get out of here.
That's awesome. Well, Terry, I can talk to you for hours, but I want to get to the Ask Alan segment as we're running out of time here. And this one's pretty cool because it's about, I think, this question. And this question is actually from Bob. He's over in San Jose, California. And I think anytime, well, you'll hear the question, it's going to help anyone, whether you're in business, whether you're high school, student, college, whatever it is. He simply asks, how do I set the proper goals? What is a good formula to follow? Now, someone like yourself, I'm sure, has a formula for goals. So I'd love to hear your answer to that.
I don't know that I have a formula for goals.
Okay.
I think the hardest part is really not having a formula. It's saying, what are the key levers of my business that I have to look at? So figure out, at the end of the year, what are the things that I have to change next year that are going to make a real difference? And as we talked about, outsource or get rid of the rest of that crap. Mm-hmm. And then set up a way that you really review your progress. Because too many of us, I'm doing an annual review for a CEO right now. And that's great. But annual reviews are pretty well worthless because we wasted 11 months. Unless you review yourself every month, how you're doing, you're not going to make progress. Right. At the end of the year, I said, gee, I was going to lose 40 pounds. I've lost one. Well, I've lost one. I don't have time. I can't
your
lose
annual
40
review.
in a month. I don't have any time left. So, maybe if you're solo, get somebody else to help you. One of the things that I never did, probably because I was in American Airlines when I built my first company, I never joined anything like YPO, like Young Presidents Association. Mm-hmm. Any one of those associations is great. YPO is great because it's non-competitive. People can help you. There are half a dozen others like that. Even Rotary. Yep. Get mentors who can help you, and then have that mentor review your goals and kick your ass. Look, yep. I've always been overweight. I work out 3 times a week with a trainer. I taught him how to use Zoom about 4 years ago because I'm moving around the country all the time. And now he's got a lot of Zoom clients during COVID. He never knew anything about Zoom. And, why do I hire him? I know what to do. Yeah. I need somebody to kick my ass to do it, or I wouldn't go in there. I'm spending $100. Yeah. I'm not going to blow $100. I go in there and do it.
And do it. Yeah. It's accountability.
So you need someone. I don't think there's a formula for the goals. It's less important. You don't have a formula. Try to pick 2 or 3 strong goals, but make sure either you kick your own ass or you got somebody to kick it to make sure that monthly or weekly or whatever it needs to be, you're reviewing your progress to that goal and you're experimenting and failing and course correcting. Yes. Because you can't, an annual budget now is a joke. Yeah. I mean, the business changes too fast. Yeah. Yeah. In business now, we're not even providing quarterly guidance anymore. Right? We don't, public companies don't do it because the world changes too fast. Too fast. They said, Wall Street, you figure it out. We'll tell you how we did at the end of the quarter. You don't do it anymore. So I think it's about, more micro measurement than macro measurement. Measure quickly and course correct all the time. One of the smartest things that I did last year was I hooked up with someone and we became accountability partners, and we get on the phone, we get on a Zoom every Tuesday morning, and we kick each other's ass. Like, did you do, okay, what are you doing this week? I'm doing this. Okay. We get on the next week. Did you do it? And I tell you what, if you don't have it done by Monday night, I'm doing it because I don't want to. You don't want to be embarrassed in front of your friend. That's perfect. That's a great idea. Yeah. I remember when I was still in a small startup and I was working with a guy at American Airlines, and he would come after me, well, did you do this? Did you do this? And I said, well, how do you even know, when things are due? And he said, well, I have a thing called a bring up file. And, it's file by date. When I just have 30 days of files and I throw something in there and I pull it out. This is before we all computerized. Now you computerize all that. Yep. I mean, I couldn't exist without a computerized to-do list.
Yep.
I'm throwing stuff on there every day and going in there and checking it off. And,
Yep.
Sometimes stuff gets pushed to the bottom, but, it's telling me every day, because I've worked for myself now for, the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And that's different than being in corporations.
Yep.
And back then I used to have an assistant. Nobody has those now. And, I got to do it myself. But I think having an accountability, it's just like having a coach.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Because you remember Superman, the slogan, the first thing they said when the Superman show came out was he was faster than a speeding bullet.
Yes.
Well, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Well,
yeah.
Faster than the speeding bullet is the speed of business today.
Yeah.
And you can't wait to make a decision.
Yeah.
And don't let a good crisis go to waste. We're in the midst of the biggest business disruption of our lives.
Yeah.
And things, something like 60% of consumers have changed a brand or their way of shopping during COVID. So if you're not there where they went, you better understand where they just went.
Yeah.
Are people going to stop getting food delivered to their house? No.
Nope.
They're not. Are they going to continue to buy food delivery boxes, of food? Yes, they will. Mm-hmm. Grocery stores have to change. Mm-hmm. Restaurants have to change.
Yep.
John Deere now has a completely computerized tractor, so they don't have to wait for the annual meeting to have the dealer tell them what they think the farmer is doing with the tractor. They know every day.
Wow.
And they adjust.
Yeah.
I love my Tesla because I go out there tonight, I might have a new car. They changed a whole bunch of stuff. It's like Christmas, several times a year. It's wonderful. That's why people love the Teslas, even though they aren't the most reliable cars in the world. They're pretty good, but they're not the most reliable. Mm-hmm. They're the safest. But they're always changing. They're getting. Whoever had a car that got better? Cars only get worse.
I didn't know that. So the Tesla, updates like iOS software updates and things like that?
Exactly the same. Yeah, I go out and it says, oh, well, now you have, this new function. We have AI-based windshield wipers. We didn't have that before that sense the rain differently. Or, we changed the way the lighting works. Or the whole layout of the screen. Or we added, these new entertainment channels are now here. Or and they added games. So when you're charging, you play games. And Musk is so crazy. You can make your turn signal make a fart sound. I mean, they're crazy stuff that they do. I mean, he does insane things, but some of them are actually very useful. But the car updates itself. He realized that today, the exciting part of the car is the software.
Yeah.
And they have one operating system. Ford has 27. Because they started from scratch. Ford has a history. Yeah. It's hard for them to get to one platform.
Yep.
And GM is trying hard to get there. So look at Musk was prevented in 18 states. The car dealers said you can't sell online because that's how they sell their cars. So they couldn't sell in 18 states. Now all the car dealers are begging to change those rules because during COVID, guess what? They found out you can sell cars online. It's cheaper and it works.
Yep.
And in those states, those guys are stuck.
Mm-hmm. Well, how about what's the company now that you can buy a car basically from a vending machine?
Yeah, Carvana.
Yeah.
Yeah, or they'll just deliver it to your house.
Right to your house.
The cars are pretty much all the same.
Yeah.
So, the design went away, the excitement went away. Kids don't even get their driver's license anymore. It's not a thing. They'd rather have a phone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a permanent change. Look at the number of people who are doing telemedicine now. Telemedicine's up like 80%. It was prohibited really before COVID. Then HHS said you can do it. Mm-hmm. People aren't going to go back. They're fully satisfied. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can do dermatology. The people are even doing dentistry. You can't have an operation, but you can do a lot of normal things, particularly, when you got one of these devices that can check you for tachycardia, take your blood pressure, answer a bunch of questions. I mean, I'm working now with my two senators here in Nevada and IBM on COVID passports because I think travel isn't going to come back until we can prove we're vaccinated.
Yeah.
You're going to certainly need it to go abroad. Nobody's going to let people in from the U.S. We have the worst COVID outbreak in the world. And I think airlines want to sell COVID-free flights where everybody is vaccinated and they prove it. Well, to prove it, you've got to have a secure, probably blockchain-based database that works with your phone,
that
you can't hack. I mean, we used to carry around this little yellow card I knew when I traveled around the world 50 years ago that said I had yellow fever shot. That's not going to work anymore.
No.
So, that's a whole new thing, and airlines are going to price based on that. You're going to see Vegas be that way. You want to come to the big convention? Prove it.
Prove that you're vaccinated.
Because I don't want an outbreak in my convention, so I'm not going to have it. You stay home and do video.
Yeah.
You want to come? Prove it.
You think that'll trickle down to restaurants?
I think it may. I think it well may. And there's going to be a lot of crap, and people are already trying to conflate it with forced vaccination. That you're forcing me to get a vaccine. No, I'm not at all. Right. But if you get a vaccination, you would probably like to prove it so that you could do certain things. And it's going to start with international travel. Right. And then I think once people have the currency, people are going to start figuring out, hey, there's smart ways to use it. Ticketmaster already has a product for vaccination or negative test, and they're going to use it in their big events. Yeah. Because that's the only way the event will get big. So the capitalist market will say, how do I get back to a full stadium? I'm going to require people to prove it. Yeah. And then people will say, well, I don't want to get a shot. Well, okay, then don't come.
Then you can't go to the stadium.
Sorry. It's like this conflated argument about freedom of speech. People are saying, well, you shouldn't throw people off Twitter. It's a private company. Freedom of speech is only that the government can't control speech. Right. It has nothing to do with private companies. Newspapers have controlled speech for centuries. Right. So, it's going to be the same thing. How do we come out of this? We come out of it by getting us back to normal. And the way to do that is get people vaccinated and get them to prove it so that business can get back to normal. Whatever the new normal is. And it isn't the old normal.
It's not going to be the old normal. Awesome stuff. Well, Terry, this has been absolutely fascinating, brilliant stuff. I really, really appreciate you being here. If people want to, you obviously don't, need to sell more stuff or whatever, but if people want to look up your website, where do they go?
Books, sure. My two books are On Innovation and Disruption Off. Okay. They're very unusual books. They're 73 two-page chapters. They're a cookbook. You can read them super fast. They're short-form media. So I think you'll enjoy them. They're available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon. My website is tbjones.com. T as in Tom, B as in boy, tbjones.com. Tons of videos there. You can watch my speeches. You can get a lot of this kind of advice because all the videos there. And if you need a really awesome speaker, you can find me there.
Yes, and obviously, if you listen to this podcast, you can see that he knows what he's talking about. I would hire him to speak, but I can't afford him. So, Terry,
well, 50% off during COVID.
Yeah, I want to thank you again for being here, and I want to thank my audience for joining me again tonight. This has been a great episode of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. Remember the Ask Alan segment. Bob from San Jose is going to get a free book signed by me for his question that we read tonight. So send one in. If I read it, you also get a signed autographed copy of my book. For Terry Jones, Al Langer saying so long, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. We'll see you next time.